Joseph was born in the autumn of his father Jacob's life, when illness of wear and worldly cares had already settled into the older man's bones. His mother Rachel was the woman Jacob loved above others, and in that affection Joseph grew, sheltered at times and exposed at others. Jacob's partiality was not subtle. It was a matter of household fact. A richly ornamented coat given to one son and not to the rest marked him plainly in the eyes of his brothers. Such gifts can be blessings, and they can be provocations. From the earliest seasons of his youth, Joseph held dreams that stood apart from ordinary thoughts. He spoke of those dreams with a candor that young men sometimes mistake for simple honesty. In one dream, his own sheaf stood upright while the sheaves of his brothers bowed before it. In another, the very sun and moon seemed to incline toward him. When he told these things, the faces around him did not soften, they hardened. Jealousy is quick to recognize a perceived slight and slow to admit the possibility of wonder. Walks to distant pastures, tasks at the flocks, and the conversations of men framed his days, yet a widening shadow took shape among his brothers. Their resentment congealed into plan, and plan into action. One company of merchants, a caravan bound for Egypt, crossed the same road his brothers took for their shepherding, and the meeting of these three threads, ambition, envy, and commerce, changed the shape of Joseph's life. He was sold. The price was measured in silver, but the consequence was measured in miles and in a sudden foreign loneliness. Canaan's hills receded from him, and the world became a place of new tongues and new masters. Potiphar, an officer of the Egyptian court, purchased him and set him to his house. There, under another roof and beneath another sky, Joseph's character revealed itself. Quiet faithfulness has a way of altering circumstance without spectacle. Potiphar observed what many do not: competence that flowed from steadiness, productivity that seemed to follow a careful hand, and integrity that needed no audience to remain true. In such a man, favor is found swiftly, yet the arena of moral choice does not vanish with promotion. The household presented its temptations as plainly as the world. Potiphar's wife, perhaps bored or resentful of loneliness, or drawn by a desire that would not be satisfied, pressed Joseph with repeated advances. He refused, not with wrath but with a composed refusal rooted in loyalty, to his master, to his oath, and to the God whose presence he had felt since the fields of his youth. When his resistance frustrated her designs, accusation followed the place of virtue. Her claim became the instrument by which he was removed from one kind of servitude and placed into another, the stone shadow of prison. Prison is a peculiar tutor. Walls instruct differently than schools. Days teach in rhythm rather than lecture. In the company of prisoners, Joseph did not lose the clarity of his mind or the steadiness of his soul. He administered whatever authority the keeper allowed him, and the affairs committed to his hands prospered as they had in the Egyptian house. Even in confinement, the presence that guided him did not withdraw. Two courtiers who had fallen afoul of the palace's favor, one a cupbearer, the other a baker, entered his charge. Dreams came upon them as dreams will, disordered and perplexing. Joseph listened, and he trusted that meaning belonged to a larger intelligence than mere human wit. He interpreted one dream with glad news and the other with sorrow, and the events unfolded as he had spoken. The cupbearer was restored, and the baker's path ended as Joseph had foretold. A debt of remembrance was promised by the man who returned to favor, yet the small mercies of memory are fragile. time swallows promises as readily as bread, and the promise to remember Joseph lay unredeemed in the passing days. Then, as if the world moved in sudden acceleration, the king himself dreamed twice, visions that no court magician could untangle. 7 robust cattle followed by 7 gaunt ones. 7 rich ears followed by 7 blasted ears. The steward who had once been helped remembered the interpreter in the prison and recalled Joseph's name. Brought before the throne, Joseph came out of darkness into light, not with the arrogance of one who had triumphed, but with the modest speech of a man who required the aid of God to speak truth. He explained the dream. Years of abundance would be followed by years of famine, and the pattern was not accidental but ordained. His counsel, practical and foresighted, was to store the plenty in the years of harvest so that the lean years might pass without destroying the nation. Pharaoh met him where intelligence and integrity intersect. He clothed him in fine linen, placed on him insignia of office, and set him over all the land with authority second only to the crown. A new name and a new wife accompanied this elevation, and the man who had been a foreign slave became the steward of Egypt's survival. In the 7 good years he organized and gathered. He prepared systems, appointed officers, and filled storehouses until the abundance ran like a quiet river through the granaries. Then the famine came, and nations came to buy of Egypt's provision. Among the multitude seeking grain were the brothers who had sold him. They bowed before him with the humility of men who do not know the identity of the one ruling over their provision. Joseph recognized them at once. They did not recognize the ruler who inspected their wares. He looked upon them with the complexity of feeling, memory, pain, and a calculation of what a just heart might require. He accused them of espionage, held one as security, and filled their sacks with grain. He returned their money to them in secret, then watched as they discovered it and feared for their lives. He summoned them back, and when Benjamin, his younger full brother, came, Joseph's spirit was moved. His steward's strange test, restoring money and secreting a cup, set in motion a drama of conscience. When the cup was found in Benjamin's parcel, his brothers tore their garments with the wrenched fear of guilty men, and Judah spoke as if the past had finally caught them. He offered himself in place of the youngest, reciting the weight of Jacob's deep sorrow, a speech that revealed both character and repentance. At Judah's plea, Joseph could restrain himself no longer. He wept aloud, an irrepressible human response, declared his identity, and spoke with a tenderness that asked them not to be hardened by the past. He named the architecture of providence plainly. What they had intended for harm, God had used for deliverance. He forgave without minimizing the harm, and he invited them to return with their father and dwell in the land of Goshen. The news of Joseph's survival returned to Jacob like a dawn. The wagons Joseph sent carried gifts, provisions, and the promise of reunion. Jacob's aged heart revived. The life lived in loss found its line again. The clan moved in a migration that altered the arc of their history. A family once scattered by malice and misfortune, gathered under the aegis of new security in a foreign land. In Goshen, the children of Israel multiplied. Seasons passed like the slow turning of pages. Jacob, whose name had become Israel through a life of struggle and covenant, lived 17 years in that Egyptian quarter before the end of his pilgrimage approached. When he felt his days draw to a close, he called Joseph close, asked a promise that his bones would be carried back to the ancestral cave, and blessed his sons with words that traced futures. His death was met with a mourning that crossed cultural boundaries. The Egyptians observed rites as Pharaoh's household attended, and the journey to the burying place in Canaan was accompanied by a procession that melded the personal grief of a family with the public honor due to one who had saved a land. After Jacob's passing, a fear returned to Joseph's brothers. Had time and reconciliation truly altered their brother's heart? They feared retribution and, in fear, sent word that their father's last charge had been forgiveness, to plead that Joseph would be reconciled. This plea unloosed another measure of Joseph's strength. He wept again and then spoke with a majesty of mind. He refused to claim the place of God. He refused to enact vengeance upon those who had wronged him. He interpreted the arc of his life as a passage in which sorrow was transformed into stewardship, harm into the mechanics of rescue. He sustained them, he sheltered them, he made his household prosper. His years in Egypt matured into a long life in which he saw grandchildren and the growth of family lines. Before his death, he assured his people of a future deliverance, asking that his bones be carried from Egypt at the appointed time. His final charge was not bitterness but hope, that the God who had moved him as a thread through the looms of pain and providence would act again in the history of his descendants. At 110 years he died, embalmed and placed within a tomb in Egypt. Yet the narrative he embodied did not end with his coffin. For those who reflect upon it, the story offers neither simplistic consolation nor facile triumphalism. It asks instead that attention be paid to how choices are made under pressure, how character is kept when no audience applauds, and how mercy is more difficult and more necessary than mere vindication. Joseph's life is a study in patience and moral imagination. It is a demonstration that wrongdoing can be admitted without annihilating hope, that leaders can be formed in the crucible of unjust suffering, and that the mind attuned to purpose can discern patterns that others cannot. The path he walked was one of suffering, yet that very suffering became the road that saved many lives.